Welcome back to TL Talks podcast. I am TL. As usual, it's good to have you. Without further ado, we'll get right into it. My first segment is called The Thought of the Day. Today's thought of the day is something that I learned basically through Instagram. So once in a while, I'll come across somebody on Instagram that um, I like what they're about, or I can learn something from them. And there's this one woman, I can't think of her name right now or her handle. I wish I could, but she had this video basically where she was gonna do a live, and then she recorded the live so people could watch it later. And what she explained, it was a little bit about her story, her life story, and she mentioned that when she was younger, she was bullied, and she was bullied pretty bad, and it had some long-term effects on basically her trust in other people and having acceptance from her peers, especially women or girls, obviously when she was younger. Now she's a woman and she's beautiful and she has a family and life is good and she's doing some positive things with her life. But that really struck me because I fortunately have never been bullied really in my life. Most of my memories as a child was being very loved by my family and friends. And so there wasn't a lot of conflict that I can remember. And so, as you know, if you never experienced that, it's kind of hard to know how that would affect you, right? But she pretty plainly described how it affected her, how she was bullied really bad when she was a kid, and then that affected her life going forward, and it was hard for her to trust people, especially females. And she's done a lot of healing, and so I think she's at a good place now. But it took her a long time to get past those experiences. And so that's my thought of the day. Just being grateful if you've never been bullied. That's a good place to start. And if you have been bullied, um, I'm sorry that happened to you. That's one of my biggest pet peeves is people bullying people. Um, and so I guess my only advice to you would be if you have been bullied in your past or even now, to realize that, be realistic with yourself, have a real conversation with yourself about how that may or may not have affected you. And if you need to get help through therapy or whatever works for you to get past those things, I strongly encourage you to do that because you want to be the best version of yourself. And whatever that however that looks for you. I'm a strong advocate of therapy myself, but I strongly suggest that you take bullying seriously and that you get yourself some help if you feel like you've never gotten past it. So that's my thought of the day. Hopefully you enjoyed it. Hopefully you learned something from it. That's always my goal. My next segment is called "If I Were President." I started that about a month ago, or not a month, when I came back to podcasting with YouTube, and it's basically just about if I were the president of the United States, what I would do differently than what's being done right now. I'm not ever gonna try to be president of the United States, but I do have some ideas and views that I feel strongly about, and so I figure it's worth just putting them out there. Um, so if I were president, what I would like to change, which this ties into my thought of the day, is how we handle bullying. I know that bullying can happen in schools when you're a young kid. It can happen, even when you're older in high school and college. But also, since social media is a thing now, and a lot of things happen online. Unfortunately, that happens online too a lot. So I've seen people say some really off-color things to other people. Um, just really low blows about their personal life or just being mean spirited. Um, and I think that kind of gets brushed under the rug because it's not in person. But to me, it's all the same. Bullying can have really serious effects on people. And so what I would do if I were president is I would make sure that there's more awareness about how wrong bullying is and higher or stronger punishments for bullying. So an example would be, first of all, educating kids from a young age about bullying and how it's wrong and you shouldn't do it. That's the first step. But then also when people choose to bully, even though they know it's wrong, um, at that point, just upping the ante as far as how they're being punished. So if they're getting suspended, times it by two. Um, if you're doing it online, I know a lot of people get away with online bullying. I think they shouldn't. I think they should be held accountable for it, whether that's a fine or jail time. It obviously would be case by case. But I just think that a lot of bullying happens every single day, and it's disgusting, and it's really disappointing. And I think we should be better than that. And so I think a lot of people find comfort in the fact that they can do it online with a fake profile. Nobody ever knows who they are and kind of get away with it and be mean spirited. And so I think that's bullshit. And so my takeaway is that bullying should be treated seriously. People should be punished more harshly, and that I would make sure that that was a priority if I were ever president. Moving on to the next segment, which is called TLRantz. This one you're going to want to buckle up for. So, as you guys know, I'm a huge fan of Joe Rogan. Joe Rogan's podcast has literally changed my life. I probably wouldn't be doing this podcast right now if it wasn't for Joe Rogan. He's had a profound effect on me as a man. I've listened to tons and tons of his podcasts, his interviews with different people, and sometimes I feel like I've learned more from his podcast than I did in college, which is crazy to say because I was in college for a long time. Um, but yeah, I just have a lot to be thankful for as it pertains to Joe Rogan's podcast. Well, as most of you know, if you're a podcast fan, which if you listen to me, you probably are. Recently, Joe Rogan has come under fire uh, with people that are trying to, take their music off of Spotify because he's on Spotify, trying to get him canceled, basically, which is that's what the world is about now, canceling people that we don't like, which is sad. Um, so yeah, basically, to try to summarize what's going on, from what I understand, there's certain things that Joe Rogan has said on his podcast throughout the years that rub people the wrong way, and some things that could be taken the wrong way, specifically towards minorities or black people. And so their response to that is to pull their music off of Spotify as a kind of a, you know, their show of disapproval towards Joe Rogan. And some of those artists have basically said, it's me or him. You either keep Joe Rogan and I go, or vice versa. So, to Spotify's credit, um, I've heard, obviously he's still on Spotify. So I give them credit for retaining him, even though they're getting pushback and social pressure to, cancel him or get rid of him. I did hear a rumor that they offered him $100 million to leave Spotify because they don't want to have the negative publicity. I'm not sure if that's true or not. You hear a lot of things. It's hard to say what's true and what's not true. But I also heard that there's a different company, I think it's called Rumble, that offered Joe Rogan $100 million contract to join their streaming service, and they promised to not try to censor him in any way. So Joe Rogan has not done that. As far as I know, he's still on Spotify. Spotify has not gotten rid of him. I think there's been up to 4 different music artists that have taken their music down because of him. And here's my takeaway. This is called TLRantz for a reason. I feel very strongly about this. This whole situation is what's wrong with America, in my opinion. We have a that society of cancel culture, where if you don't like what's going on, you try to get that person unemployed, get them fired, and quiet their voice. Joe Rogan, ironically, is one of the biggest advocates of free speech and having real conversations with real people that make real progress as far as his understanding. Um, so, I mean, just the whole thing is sad. So, I guess my rant is just that I love Joe Rogan. I probably always will. I would love to have the success that he's had in podcasting. I don't think that'll ever happen for me for obvious reasons. I mean, he's one in a million. But yeah, I look up to him. I think he's an awesome person. I've learned tons from his podcast. And I think one of the things that bothers me is I think we as a society we don't look at people's intentions. Um, You have people that are criticizing Joe Rogan, and these are people living in glass houses. You know what I mean? People that don't talk for a living like Joe Rogan does. So imagine having over 1,000 podcasts, talking to guests from all over the world, from all different backgrounds, people that agree with you, don't agree with you, everything in between. All that talk time, right? Thousands of hours of talking, being recorded, talking, having these long, long form conversations, and somebody trying to like nitpick that and find something where you misspoke or you said something that they didn't like the way you said it, right? Just that whole like, it's so ridiculous to me. Like, Joe Rogan's not perfect. I'm not perfect. There's a good chance you watching this are not perfect. So why in the hell do we feel like it's okay to judge somebody's actions, especially from 10 years ago or whatever? Sometimes they're digging, 10, 8, 10, 12 years ago, to something they said or did, trying to villainize that person and label them as this or that, and ultimately trying to get them canceled. And that affects them, their career, their family. It's just a very selfish, self righteous way to live your life when you're trying to do that. And I don't jive with that at all. So I think obviously, I'm ride or die for Joe Rogan. If he goes down, I'll go down with him. I'm not going to take him off of my website. I put on my website people specifically that I support, um, and so that's where I stand. Joe Rogan's the man. He always will be. His intentions are good. Is he perfect? No. Does he misspeak sometimes? Yeah. I'm sure I do too. You probably do too. But the difference is you're not Joe Rogan. You're not being recorded for over 1,000 yards, 1,000 hours of talking. And so for you to judge him when you misspoke, especially when you know that his intentions are good, which you probably don't know his intentions are good. You probably don't. You never listened to his podcast. You just heard one little small sound bite of something that he said that offended you. So for you, that was enough. Oh, I've heard enough. He's an idiot. He's racist. He's what? Let's cancel him. Well, here's the problem. First of all, did you hear it in context? Second of all, do you know Joe Rogan? Have you ever met him? Do you know what his intentions are? Does he only have white people on his podcast? How is it when he has black people on his podcast? Is there like some kind of racial tension? Absolutely fucking not. I'll answer that for you. Joe Rogan doesn't have a racist bone in his body. So for him to say something that he didn't say the way you wanted him to say it, get the fuck out of here. Like, Joe Rogan is a top 3 podcast in the world for a reason. He has a strong following for a reason. There's people like me that will stand up for Joe Rogan for a reason. And all those reasons are we've listened to thousands of hours of his podcast. He is empathetic. He's cool. He's understanding. Um, he has a heart of gold. And the only thing that's selfish about him is that he brings on people on his podcast he wants to learn from, which isn't even really selfish because it ends up helping us too because we're able to learn through it. So this guy has a huge platform. I support everything that he does. I know it's kind of dangerous to say that because you're making a blanket statement about a person, which sounds dangerous. But Joe Rogan's in that rare air where I feel comfortable saying that. He's an amazing person. He is generous. He helps his friends out whenever he can. He helps any good cause that he believes in. I mean, the guy's very wealthy, but he's also very generous. So if I could be 1/10 or 1% of as awesome of a man as he is, he's about 10 years older than me, or have as much success as he's had, I'd be thrilled. But that whole thing just happened recently. It pissed me off for obvious reasons. I know not many people care about my opinion, but for what it's worth, those people should be ashamed of themselves. Um, Chances are none of them have met Joe Rogan in person. And if they did any type of research whatsoever, they would realize that he is a good guy with good intentions, very sincere. And he even came out with an apology, even though he didn't really even need to do that. And so it's just like with these people, there's no pleasing them, right? Like once you've done something wrong in their eyes, it doesn't matter if you do an apology. It doesn't matter, you know what I mean? Like if you take that down, they're relentless with trying to get you canceled. And so I think Joe Rogan is one of the very rare people that can actually circumvent that and survive that because a lot of people, when they try to get them canceled, it succeeds, unfortunately. So I'm not down with cancel culture. I'm not down with canceling Joe Rogan. And I've spoken my piece. Thanks for listening. Let's touch on one more thing before we get into the interview. So the Super Bowl happened on Sunday. It was an awesome game. I told you guys before, uh, the Bengals getting to the Super Bowl was highly unlikely. Uh, they, I read a stat on the TV that said something like, this is the first team in NFL history to go to the Super Bowl with the most sacked quarterback in the NFL, which is the whole. That's what I said from the beginning. I said they're not even going to make the playoffs because they don't protect their quarterback. So you can have a good quarterback, great quarterback, good skill positions, good receivers, good tight end, good running back, which they do. But if you don't protect the quarterback, it just isn't going to work out. Because if you don't protect the quarterback, you probably can't stay healthy. He's going to get sacked all the time. He's never going to feel comfortable in the pocket. It's just not a recipe for success. But the Bengals defied the odds this year and kept on winning, even though I thought they were going to lose all the way to the Super Bowl. So then going to the Super Bowl, I was trying to break it down. I'm like, okay, well, the Bengals are obviously going to prove me wrong one last time and win a ring, which I didn't want that because I'm a Browns fan. Or the Rams are going to pull it out. Their luck's finally going to run out, and their D line is going to wreak havoc on the Bengals O line, and it's going to be enough to beat them. So as you guys saw, the game was interesting. I thought the Bengals they were in the driver's seat for most of the game, really. And then the Rams had to get some key stops in the second half to give themselves a chance, and they did that. So all in all, it was an interesting NFL season. Of course, my Browns, um, underachieved, to say the least. But I'm happy for the Bengals. I don't hate them. They're from Ohio, so I'm happy that they were able to make it that far in the playoffs. I'm glad they didn't get a ring, because for the Bengals to get a ring before my Browns get a ring would be very depressing. But I mean, a ring recently. I'm not talking about 20 years ago. Um, but yeah, so all in all, awesome season. Disappointing for my Browns. Happy for the Bengals. Um, I'm mostly happy for the Rams. I mean, I have very mixed feelings about OBJ. I'm not sure if you guys can relate. Half of me wants to think that he's a good guy, a good teammate, um, just wants to make the most of his talent. And the other half of me hears stuff like he told Von Miller not to come to Cleveland, which seems kind of shady and two-faced to me. And so I don't know. It's hard for me to get a conclusion with OBJ. In a perfect world, I'd be able to invite OBJ onto the podcast and ask him some hard questions, and that would help me decipher where I stand with him. But obviously, I don't think he's going to be coming on anytime soon. But yeah, I mean, I'm happy for Matt Stafford. He had to go through all those tough years in Detroit. I'm happy for the Rams. I mean, I like Sean McVay. I like most of their team. Cooper Kupp is the man, and so all in all, it was a good experience as a football fan to see the Rams get a ring, and I'm looking forward to next season. So I think Baker Mayfield having surgery and getting healthy will dramatically change how our team looks, how our offense looks, all that stuff for next year. OBJ leaving gives us a little bit of a void at a receiver, so we'll see how we address those through the draft or free agency. But yeah, man, I'm a football fan. So now that NFL's over, I'm full all in with women's football. I'm with the Denver Bandits. We are practicing right now. Our first game is in early April. Unfortunately, our first game is not only against the Utah Falcons, but it's in Utah, which may or may not have been orchestrated by Utah. But yeah, that's the reality. That's the first game. And so we have a lot of work to do, a lot of moving parts, a lot of new players. Most of the players from other states or other countries are here already. We had an awesome turnout at practice on Sunday. I think there was, in the 40s. I want to say in the 40s for how many players were there. So awesome turnouts, and I can't wait for the season to start. So I'll keep you guys posted on how it's going. Without further ado, we're going to get into the interview. My interview this week was with Chris Garza. Chris Garza has been on the podcast before. He is from the Nevada Storm, who are a top 10 team, in my opinion, in the WFA. They won the D3 championship in the WFA, were moved up to D2, immediately won the D2 championship in WFA. Now they're moved up to D1, which is called WFA Pro. And so this season will be interesting because they've, you know, won every division they've been in. But as we know, WFA Pro has the best teams that there are in the WFA. And so beating teams like Minnesota and Boston, DC, etc., is easier said than done. And so I'm intrigued. As a football fan, I can't wait not only for my team and my league, but also for that league too. There's some certain matchups that are going to happen this season. We talk about it in the interview that I'm salivating for. Just to see how they go, watch the film, and just enjoy them as a fan. But anyways, yeah. So my guest is Chris Garza. He is the head coach and defensive coordinator of the Nevada Storm, who is a top notch, like I said, top 10 team in the WFA. And so I had him on before. That was when I used to just do audio, and this is my first ever. Watch yourself. First ever video interview. And so hopefully you guys enjoy it. And without further ado, here we go. All right. So I'd like to welcome Chris Garza back to the TL Talks podcast. Chris, this is as I told you, this is the first ever recorded video interview of my podcast career. So first of all, thank you for being the guinea pig. And it's great to have you back on.
Hey, thanks, Terry. I'm really happy. I'm excited to be being on talking to you face to face. This is actually a pretty cool format.
Yeah, absolutely, man. So like I said, I love talking about life in football. Let's do life first. So I talked to you about 2 years ago, I think, if my memory serves me correctly.
Yep.
Since then, I know, Nevada Storm is only went up in the ranks. You guys won the D3 championship and the D2 championship, and now you're in D1. They call it WFA Pro. Me and you both love football, and we're going to talk plenty about football. But in your personal life, is there anything noteworthy besides you being an old man like me that's happened in the last couple of years?
Turn into an old guy.
Yeah.
Just focusing more on teaching than I am, the doing. Taking less of the reps off in practice. Don't have to do that much anymore.
Yeah.
I can blame it on my age.
Yeah.
No, I mean, nothing significant personally. I mean, this past year with the WFA, last time you and I talked, I was named WFA Coach of the Year. And that was a big accolade. And I think that was the biggest achievement in the past couple of years that since you and I've talked.
Yeah.
No, I really don't feel like there's nothing that personally has changed or there's something big. I'm a pretty boring guy.
Yeah.
All I do is think about football.
That's not boring at all. I can relate. So yeah, I guess we can get into football right away. One of the first things you said is something I can relate to, and that's the whole shift, right? So when I used to coach a team in WFA, first year we had 23 players total, and then fortunately 4 years later we were up into high 30s, around 40 players. And now with my new team, the Denver Bandits in the WNFC, numbers are crazy, man. I got to tell you. So I think last season was the first time in my coaching career where I had the luxury of having serious numbers at practice, going 11v11, offense against defense, being able to run a scout O and a scout D. And as you know, that's pretty close to mandatory. If you want to play teams like Boston and Texas Elite and these top 10 teams, I mean, there's no way around it. You're like, it's one thing to prepare for the Utah Falcons. It's another thing to be able to actually run 11v11 and try to simulate their offense. You're never going to do it like them. They've been doing it for 7 years, but to at least try to, simulate that so your players aren't seeing it for the first time in the game. It's just so important. But where are you guys at? Because I know for my team, We have probably around 50 or 60 players, and then what's interesting is we have like 5 or 6 international players, and we have 5 or 6 players that are playing from out of state. And I've never had the luxury of that either. I've always had players that lived in my same state. They were all local. They could all drive to practice. But now seeing these players, do all this crazy stuff like relocate and fly from out of state for practice, it's crazy to see. So I'm curious. You guys have a top-notch program as well, but I have no idea about your inner workings. So I'm not trying to be too nosy, but how does that look for you guys as far as your numbers and you know what I mean?
We gained some new players this year. We actually hit some really good numbers. Last, I think back in 2018, we were in the IWFL national title game with 14 players suited, 13 players suited.
Oh boy.
And that was down in Houston in Texas heat. That's something, if you've never experienced that, that's watch out.
That's not a good equation.
No. But we went from that, and that was my first year of being head coach. And then, going from there, and we finished out the championship 2021, or excuse me, 19 with 24 players. And then 2021, we had 26 suited. So for the championship. So, I mean, this year we're going to have a lot more than that, and we're really grateful. It's hard to say because usually, especially with a team like us, we're really technical. We've already planned out all the practices for the first half of football here. We run a very structured program, and this year we're actually going to be able to run ones versus ones, and actually, I'm really excited about that. And this morning, like you said, we're getting all this international attention. We just picked up our first international player ever, and literally picked her up this morning from the airport. So
yeah,
it's everything's come together. We're all growing as a team. Our coaching staff is really going through some growing pains because we've got more guys coming on, and we're just at that one stage of, if everybody gets together at this point and stay solidified, we can really guarantee a great season. I think that was our weapon of success last year was all our coaches had the same continuity.
Yeah. So that's awesome. So you can relate as far as getting your first international player. It's blown my mind, man. I don't want to talk about my team too much, but the owners of the Denver Bandits, Marcel and John, like you got to imagine. I mean, I'm preaching to the choir right now, but like having a team of 40 women, right, or 50 or 60 women, it's kind of like herding cats at times, right? And then when you have moving parts like that, and you have players coming from out of state or relocating from other countries, you're talking about visas and all this other stuff to make sure that they can actually get here, right? It's one thing for them to be interested and want to be here, another thing to actually get them here and follow through. So they rented out a 4-bedroom apartment in Denver for the international students to have a place to stay. And I'm so impressed with it, man. It's like,
I think we're all doing the right thing to just promote women's football. No matter what league it is. If they're coming here to play, then there's a reason why they're coming here to play.
Yeah,
we got something. We're on to something.
Yeah.
I feel like if and I had a very heartfelt speech after our Houston game last year, and I told everybody it's going to take all of us. It's going to take every one of us, and not just us coaches, us players. It's going to take the opposing team, the opposing coaches. It's going to take the league to actually step up their game a little bit, and rules and setting standards for all coaches to just be better for the league. I really think that's where it really stands, and we could get better as a league and promote women's football a lot better if the coaches were very professional, and if the supporting staff around the ladies were just focused on nothing but the ladies. It's just hard to get there when nobody's paying up and giving that paycheck to the people that really deserve it.
For sure. So one question I have for you, Chris, is one thing that me and you have in common, and we have more than one thing in common from our last interview, but one thing we have in common is that at one point in our careers, we were head coaches of women's football teams. And so I know from my own path, I had played football my entire life, everything from midget football league through a little bit of college and semi-pro. I still play, flag football recreationally. I've always played football. I always wanted to coach. I always had a feeling I'd be a good coach. And then I just randomly got the opportunity, an online ad, responded to it. And, here we are 7 years later. So I'm curious what your background is and how you kind of got into coaching. Because, everybody's story is different, but women's football is kind of a hidden gem in America. So
It is. It is. I first fell in love with football when I was 6 years old. I saw my uncle play for the state championship in six-man football in Texas. And
yeah.
that was going to all those games and the road games. And where I lived, I could literally throw a rock and it would go into the football field. So for me to be a part of that town, that little small town of Lone, Texas, and just to be a part of that, the tradition of winning there, and how everybody there was all about football. They just lived for it. They breathed it. The kids ate it up. And growing up around that, you just wanted to succeed in football. And that's all you wanted to do. Flash forward when going through the youth leagues and junior high and high school, I got really good honors throughout high school, but being 6 foot, 215 pounds is probably not a good center size for a college level, or not a really good defensive end or outside linebacker spot either. So it's one of those things. And that's when I unfortunately said, football is just not going to in my physical future, but I definitely know what this game's about. And that I feel like my football knowledge is what actually propelled my success in football personally, because I was definitely undersized, but I was always that one game turner. I found out my senior year when I started getting double teamed every play, and I'm like, why the heck am I not doing anything? And then I was so frustrated with it. My coach said, hey, it's a good thing if you're getting double teamed.
Yeah.
It's those things, So after that, I was done with football. I mean, completely done. And about 5 years later, I hadn't even picked up anything. Didn't volunteer for youth football. Didn't go out for high school football. When I was going to college, it wasn't even thinking about sports. It wasn't even. I got as far away from football as I could, as I tried to, and as soon as I was out, they brought me back in. Right. So I met Coach Barrett, my best friend here, and he's also the assistant head coach of our team. I met Coach Barrett, and we started talking, and football just popped with us too. Yeah. And he could talk to me about football without me having to write down things, and he was just like, "Oh, okay." And so just that's where it all started. And so for a whole summer when we worked together, we were just talking about football and what we would do if we got a team. And you got to understand, we were in 22, 23, so we're a bunch of knuckleheads, a couple knuckleheads. And years later, Coach Barrett, pretty soon after Coach Barrett came and coached up here in Reno. And I was just sitting on the couch, and he kept asking me to come coach. And one day he just caught me on a good day, and it's like, all right, sure. Yeah. And flash forward to here I am. Yeah. I when I moved to Reno, I had 2 duffel bags, and Coach Barrett came and got me from the airport. We went directly from the airport straight to the football field, and we started coaching together. Yeah. And that's all she wrote. And that's how it's been ever since.
Yeah. The rest is history. Right on. So let me ask you this. So we talked about how, I haven't experienced international players, out-of-state players, or having a roster size this big until recently. And you probably can relate to a certain extent. How many, because this is kind of a guess, right? But how many teams in America do you think can relate to that? Because I feel like it's not a very long list. I think there's maybe 10 to 12 teams, but maybe I'm wrong. You know what I mean? It's
So I've been here for about 13 years.
huh?
And in the 13 years of coaching,
Yeah,
this is the first year we've really had to worry about that or actually game plan for that. Um,
yeah,
the, the one thing that irks me more than anything as a coach is if I see stagnant players, like if we're just wasting time. I mean, that's, we come up with things so that way opponents, take the time out of their
yeah,
practice to teach it. Because if you don't, we're going to get you, you
yeah,
know? And so for me, I really don't like stagnant players. So it's been a challenge. And you're right. Um, when you have a bigger team or a bigger roster, it challenges you as a coach to actually come up with a solution. And out of the 13 years, this is probably the first year that we've really had to buckle down and actually
figure that
focus
out.
on the actual practices. Yeah. And
Wow.
I'm talking by the minute. I mean, we have drills that are 4 minutes long.
Yeah,
There's some that are 3 minutes long.
yeah.
So it's very precise, but it's for a reason.
Hmm. How many teams do you think there are that could claim the same? Because my
I
guess
would
would
say,
be 10 to 12, but I'm curious
yeah,
what
I
you
was about to
think.
say a dozen
Yeah,
maybe.
yeah,
Yeah, because you have like Boston,
of
maybe
course.
Pittsburgh,
Yep.
Utah for sure,
Utah, Texas Elite,
Texas Elite,
mhm.
um,
Maybe DC, right?
DC. I would imagine the Rebels would be pretty big this year.
Yeah.
Um, DC Divas, Seattle, possibly
Hmm.
Spartans, right?
Seattle Majestics.
Majestics, yes, sorry,
Yeah, yeah, that's
sorry.
okay. Yeah, yeah.
And
I was just curious if you agreed. I figure
yeah,
it's about 10 or
no,
12.
yeah,
Not,
absolutely. I totally agree with you. I think that there's not that many rosters that are that big, but
yeah.
given the opportunity, everybody wants to join a winning team.
Mhm. Yeah, I was talking about this in a previous podcast, and I was talking about the different pillars of a championship organization. And what I came up with, and you can disagree or agree, but they were number one, talent, number two, numbers. So do you have legit numbers that can, you know, make it through a whole
Yeah,
season, practice 11v11? Number three is culture. Do you have the right culture that women want to be a part of? And number four is coaching, and not in that order, obviously. That those are in no certain order, but those are the four pillars, in my opinion. If you have
yeah,
all those things lined up, you can play with anybody and have a
yeah.
chance at winning a title. So, um, of course, I apply that to my team when I'm trying to evaluate our team objectively. Um, but would you say that would you agree with that? Would you add anything to that list?
No, I would say one thing more is commitment
Yeah,
because I mean we can always walk through those things, and then there's teams that do they have all of those components and
yeah,
they just walk through the process and you just walk through that process and you get comfortable. Then
yeah.
that's where you're going to start to fail, and then you start asking yourself, well, why don't we have a winning team?
Mm.
Um, one of the I guess one of the best examples, and I'm not, this is not a dig at all, but the Cleveland Browns have all the talent in the world,
Yep.
but it's just there's something missing to that
Right.
whole key. You know what
Mhm.
I mean? And
Yeah.
if that's the holdback, and if you're just walking through it, and that's what I believe it is, if you're just walking through those days, um, everybody else that's working hard is going to outrun you
Mm.
100%. I mean, it comes down to, did we win the practice? Did we work harder than everybody else in the country that day? You
Mm.
know, so it's you really have to. It's the commitment that you take into the time that you're going to do, and make sure that you get quality reps in your practices.
Yeah.
And the only way you can do that is as a player is to
Mhm.
take yourself seriously and trust yourself, and then just do your very best every practice.
Yeah. Yeah. I think that mentality is definitely the right mentality. I also wonder because I'm very analytical. I wonder how many teams would mirror that, right? So I believe you when you say that that's the standard for Nevada Storm. Um, but I wonder, I think you could kind of assume that that's the standard for Boston and Dallas Elite. You know, they're two top teams. I know that St. Louis is a hell of a team. I would assume their standards are pretty high too, but it's kind of hard to say, right? Especially if you haven't talked to anybody from a certain
Yeah.
team to know their inner workings or how they work or don't work. Um, it's just hard to say, you know. And I guess the secret sauce that I'm curious about, Chris, is you had a team that started off small, and then it's built up to this year being the first time where you had to worry about now worry is a loose term, but worry about trying to coordinate numbers. So with more players, obviously it becomes more difficult, right, to get everybody on the same page. Same thing
Yeah.
with coaches. So what would you say the secret sauce is to get people to buy in and be able to expend all their energy and not hold anything back? You know what I mean? Because it's easier for people to coast or to make excuses or say the weather's shitty. You know what I'm saying, or whatever. Just
Yeah, it is. I think it really comes down to leadership.
mm,
It really comes down to the leadership. And um, for me, when I came into the role, I promised our board that I'd bring home a championship. I didn't think we'd do two, and I wasn't thinking that quick either.
yeah,
But I promised them a championship, and I told them I want to change the way we do things around here, and I want to change the culture of our team. And I said
mm,
I can only do that if you have my back, and they absolutely did.
mm,
And so the standards that we set in were the hard work things, and it doesn't matter who you are. I guess it's crazy to give you the secret, but here's the secret. Um, I tell my players just to be themselves and do the best that they can possibly do.
mm,
And for some reason, throughout the whole year, they keep getting better, and they start believing in themselves, and that just exudes in themselves, and not only on the football field but outside in their personal lives. And I got to calm down sometimes because people do get promotions, and you're like, no, 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 wait a second, you still got to play some football here.
yeah,
But it's truly about letting the girls be them. But where it came around was, you want me to be very honest. Um, every now and then as a coach, you get a team and you
mm,
see all the special players and the special places and the right places. And you look at it and you're like, man, this could be something really valuable.
mm,
And I saw it. I showed Coach Barrett and he saw it. And we believe in these ladies. And 100%, we are behind the ladies before anybody else. I mean, it's not about us coaches. It's about the ladies. And that's where it's at. So that's the secret is we just we actually just we stumbled into a great team with people with great ethics,
mm,
um, great workmanship. They love working their butts off,
mm,
and then they like to play football, and then
yeah,
on top of that they're willing to learn
mm,
and change. So that was the big thing.
gotcha. So when you joined the team and you said you want to change the program and develop new habits and all that stuff, and luckily the board was behind you. What was the team like before that? Were they uh, disorganized mess or what?
I think they were a great team. They were a good team. I just
Yeah.
think they just had the wrong parts in the wrong places, and
Uh,
just putting pieces together. It just moving things around, and that's all it really took. And then just changing the mentality of what women's football really is, and setting don't set the limits behind a gender of what women's football is. It should just be football, to be honest with you.
yeah.
But
That's what it is
now,
to me.
but of course, it's football to us coaches. But of course, with competition, there
Mhm.
is a line. But no, I truly believe that it is all about just going out there and doing your very best and just being yourself when you're doing it. And
Mm.
because you choose that player for that spot for your team for a reason. And
Yeah.
it's up to us as coaches to make sure that they feel the best about themselves in doing their job.
Mm. Gotcha. That's
We just
fair.
yeah, we love it. We keep eating it up. Um, we just want to get better every day.
So there's a conversation I had recently. that I'm not going to share who I was talking to, just because I don't know if he'd want me to. But I'll just say it was a little birdie told me something about the inside workings of the WFA. What he told me was that basically the standard for moving teams from division to division is that if you've won a championship in that division, or you have been to the championship multiple times, then that's enough for them to move you up. And so what I saw was, Nevada Storm won D3, won D2, now they're in D1. But also Detroit, who just rebranded themselves, have never won a championship, but they have been to multiple championships, and they're moved up as well. So I know nobody cares about my opinion, but I agree with the first part. I think if you win your division, you deserve to go up and see what happens. And as long as you don't have a big drop off in numbers, that makes sense. I don't agree with the second part though. I don't agree with a team that's been the championship multiple times being moved up because, you know, I'm not trying to take a shot at Detroit, but if Detroit represented the East twice in the championship, and let's say hypothetically both games weren't really competitive, right? So what that tells me is you have Nevada Storm that was considerably better than everybody else in D2. And before that, you had St. Louis, who was considerably better than everybody in D2. So fortunately, both Nevada and St. Louis are in D1, but I don't agree with Detroit going up to D1. So I guess just that's the only thing I would disagree with. And I know it's
No. I think that's a valid point.
yeah,
I think Detroit's a great team. I really do. I mean, they're
yeah, they're
there
very
every
good.
year for a reason.
Yeah, yeah.
Uh, they were they caught us off guard right there in the first quarter of the national title game there.
Did
But
they?
oh yeah, oh yeah. But then they tried to run a hideout pass on us in the second quarter,
Uh-huh.
and then so we told the line, and then they were flagged because they literally came off the sideline instead of going to the numbers and going back out. And so we told our ref that we were going to run hideout pass when we came out of third quarter, just show just show them how it's done. But I really think that moving up every year after you win the championship, I really truly believe you should. I
Yeah,
mean,
yeah. I agree.
why stay at one level and just keep dominating? There's no reason to
Yeah.
do that.
You're
That's
not
not
getting
going to
better.
help women's football. No.
Correct.
Um, I think Detroit was more of a. It wasn't a because they were there so many times. There's also the WFA is also set, and don't take it from me, officially, but I think the some of the standards were if you were in your city was over a certain population, and then also it had something to do with with where you lived
The
and
demographics.
the demographics of your team, and
Oh,
that's really all it was. I really think that's why they're in the pro. They absolutely deserve to be there. They're really good players. However, um, they've got a lot more. They got a lot more competition this year.
yeah.
I really think out of the East, if you're asking me, I think Pittsburgh is a big um, competitor
Contender.
out of the East.
Yeah.
Yep, and St. Louis Slam as well. They're a great team. They're a really good team.
So what I like to do, um, is I like to do like a virtual tour of last season since I didn't talk to you last season. But
Yeah.
before I do that, um, since I have some relationships with certain like I have a relationship with people on Detroit, St. Louis, several of the big teams. I can tell you that what's intriguing about St. Louis this year, they didn't play last year, and then this year is the first year that they don't have their former like OC basically. I don't know if he was considered the head coach or not. Doesn't really matter, but he called the offense, right? So you have Q that was calling the defense and Rodney that was calling the offense. And Rodney's not coaching anymore. This is the first time they didn't have Rodney, and I'm wondering how that's going to affect the team, right? Because as you know, every year players are older. Nobody's can fight father time, so players are getting older, and you have these two mainstays with St. Louis, Rodney and Quincy, that have been great coaches, awesome for the sport, and gave us an awesome product for years and years. So for that to break up, and I don't think it's a big drama thing. I think it was just time for him to
No.
step away. But you have to wonder, right? Like Quincy's an awesome coach and he's awesome at calling defense. Can we assume that he can call offense just as good? Can we assume that they're not going to miss a step? It
Um,
remains to be seen.
it does. I really hope he has some. If that's the case, I really hope he has some experience in doing that. When I started coaching for Nevada Storm, I started as the offensive coordinator,
Yeah.
and I implemented a playbook that I created, a couple of years back, and it was based off of like a almost like a Chip Kelly hybrid.
Mm-hmm.
Um, Chip Kelly playbook, pretty much.
Yeah.
Didn't really go too well, and I'm not an offensive coordinator. I'm more of a defensive coordinator, and that's all
Yeah.
I've ever done. So um, when the power switch came, that's what was changed, and I brought in Adam to run the offense. But I think St. Louis, man, I'm a fan of theirs. So I don't know. I think
Yeah.
they're
Me
great.
too.
They're loaded with great players.
Mhm.
They've got a whole bunch of great players. Um, so I guess a change of coach might, affect some things. But then again, we never know because who knows? Maybe the next coach they brings something fresh and just changes it all. You never
Yeah.
know. That
Yeah.
that's kind of the gamble you get.
Yeah. Well, I did talk to Rodney, and he told me that Quincy has called offense before. I think at
Uh,
like a local high school, and so he has experience with that. It won't be his first time, so that bodes well for him in that way. But I also very strongly believe, you know, there's only one Rodney. You know what I'm saying?
yeah,
So
yeah.
not that Rodney's better than Quincy or vice versa, but Rodney's Rodney, and I've seen him in action. I went and watched D2 championships in person, and it's a thing of beauty, man. I've coached against him. I've watched him from the stands. I consider him a friend of mine, and he actually this will crack you up. I talked to him recently, and since he's not coaching anymore, I said, "Well, you can tell me all your tricks now because you're not coaching anymore." And so he did. He on the phone, we talked for about 15 minutes. He explained his offense, how he makes calls, hand signals, what certain words mean, and how they color. It was awesome. You know what I mean? I was taking notes, and I'm like, well, if I ever coach again, that's going to come in handy. But
Yeah.
but yeah, it makes you wonder, right? It makes you wonder about how that's going to look. But I'm a huge fan of women's football and a huge fan of St. Louis for sure.
I feel like when you get a good coach and um, they leave the program, I mean, um, it could be devastating. But however, I think the players that they leave behind, and great coaches will leave those footprints for those players,
Mm.
and those players will set the same standards that coach had, um, and lead the rest of the pack,
Yeah,
where they should. I really truly believe he's a great coach. I was hoping to play against him, so just to hear that's kind of devastating. To be honest with
yeah, yeah. You're right, though. I mean, those guys are really good friends, and they've spent a lot of time building up that program and setting the culture. So on paper, you can make the assumption that the culture won't change, and that players know what to do and how to do it. The only difference will be actually on the field coaching when you're making, you got to think it's different brain, right? So whatever, however Rodney would call a game or make adjustments, or you know what I mean, or whatever, it would be really hard for Quincy to duplicate that.
that
But
that would be like me calling Adam Barrett's offense,
yeah,
knowing all the terminology, but just
yeah,
not having the same mindset
exactly,
and setups that he's got going on.
exactly,
Um, it's I feel like when we lose a good coach, I
yeah,
feel like if they're great enough, they're just going to leave that impression.
yeah,
And it just really stinks to hear because that was like one team I
yeah,
really hope does well. I really hope does well this year.
yeah. One thing that was puzzling to me was I saw WFA release their schedule. And like when you look at the schedule, they'll highlight certain games are going to be televised or streamed or whatever. But then they didn't do that for the Boston versus St. Louis game. And I'm like, dude, if you're going to pick any game to stream, that's it. That's the game that I want to go fly and watch in person. You know what I'm
I,
saying?
I agree with you. I totally
Yeah.
agree with you. I was like,
I'm
why
like,
isn't this one?
who's making these calls? So
Maybe the Pittsburgh Boston one would be a good one too. Maybe.
yeah,
Um, Yeah, but we're fortunate enough to be a couple of those.
Yeah,
So the Cali War and us are nationally televised, and then Minnesota. Um,
Vixen.
yeah,
You
that's
playing
going to
them
be
at
a good
home
one.
or there?
We're playing them at home, so
Okay.
we'll be playing them here. They'll be our second game in the schedule.
Yeah,
So
that'll
really
be a good
early
game.
matchup. I really think it's going to be a great game. Um, I put it out there to my team. I'm a big fan of Grace Cooper. I think she's one of the most underrated running backs in our league.
Mhm.
Um, from what I understand, she works really hard for what she wants, and that team really adores her. So, and they're not alone. I mean, she's a really good runner.
Yeah. Okay, so let's go ahead and do the virtual tour of last year, Chris. So, since I follow from a distance, right? I'm a fan of the sport, so I'm very engulfed in the Denver Bandits and the WNFC, but I kind of keep tabs on the WFA, especially top teams, teams that I have personal relationships with, teams that I root for, and you know that I'm just a fan of excellence in general. So if you can exude excellence on the field, then I'm a fan and I'm going to follow you closely. So I know how your season went on paper, but as you know, experiencing it and seeing it on paper is two different things. So how would you describe how that season went? Ups and downs, tough games, obstacles, etc.
Yeah, we had some. Believe it or not, Cali War was actually our first tough game, and what I mean by that was, you know, we went out there, did what we needed to do, um, but at the end of the game, there was a couple of injuries that we had,
Yeah,
and then we had those rookies that were filling those injury spots really step up, and that's why we had a great win. The next week should have been a great game for us, and we had a significant loss and injury with one of our players, two of our players, one of our best uh, utility backups on defense and kickoff was gone, and then we lost our middle linebacker, which had a breakout game against Cali War. Um, you know, when those things happen mid-season, it's just like, especially for a defensive coordinator, you're like, okay, uh, we got to buckle down. We really got to change some things and make sure that we're doing the right things to put ourselves in the right position now.
mm-hmm.
And so the whole year we were just crossing our fingers that there was going to be no more injuries.
Yeah,
Everybody's going to stay healthy. So we did as much as possible to do that. I really think that our Cali War games and was just that standing point of like saying, hey, we're ready to play with everybody else.
mm-hmm.
And so when we got the chance to play um, Denver, Denver was awesome. Denver's a great team. Um, they gave us great opportunity. Uh, we played a good ball game. I think we were really rusty that game, and I don't even know why we were so nervous. But of course, it could have been something like, hey, this is this the second time that we've made it this far, and really wanted to win the championship.
Yeah,
Um, I feel like just our injuries and our lack of depth in some areas was really just holding our breath throughout
mm-hmm.
the season. And that was just the toughest thing was, well, we just hope that nobody else goes down. And so we were only one, maybe two players away of being back in the situation where we're in 2018, where
Mm-hmm.
we were playing, suited 13 players and get 13 players. But, you know, um, I'm not saying we were that in trouble with injury, but it felt like if we didn't make some right moves, then we could be in a bad spot.
Mm-hmm.
So that's what we were fighting most of the year, was just injuries and keeping everybody healthy and coming up with practice plans and how can we make this happen so that way we still have the physicality that we want, because our defensive mantra is 4/5 of our body is going to be on 4/5 of your body every time,
Yeah,
and we love it. The women eat it up, and that's how we play.
yeah,
But we had to adjust things just to make sure that everybody's going to stay healthy.
mm-hmm.
And for us, that was our number one focus throughout the year, or throughout the end of the year. And then on top of that, um, just getting our way to Canton that way, just
Mm-hmm.
playing consistent football. Houston came by, and they were a great team. They had 3 weeks almost 4 weeks to prepare for us, because the forfeiture of Sin City just boosted them up, and the way our playoff brackets were last year, they got 4 weeks off before they got to play us. So
Yeah.
um, it gave them plenty of time to prepare for us, and I think that helped them out, and made that game so close that we were kind of holding our breath to the final couple series, and we're like, okay, we got this.
Yeah.
Um, and then when we get to actual Canton, Ohio, that was an experience all in itself. I got to meet a lot of the coaches. I got to meet some of the Detroit coaches. Um, all the coaches I met that weekend were just amazing.
Yeah.
They all wanted to do the same thing. They wanted to have their teams win, be successful, and just get better in the knowledge of football. So it was a great weekend. Really, the whole year we just contended with finding a way to win without losing more players, and that is that's a summary of the best thing I could say about last year.
Interesting. So, when you said you had 2 injuries versus Cali War, and then 2 more injuries the next week, one of them being a really good middle linebacker that had a breakout game, are you saying that's four players that are out for the season?
There were two out of those four. Yeah,
Okay,
there were
gotcha.
two out of the four. Yeah, one was one was pretty bad, and nobody would have known about it. So
Yeah.
it was just one of those things where um, we just thank the stars that she went to the doctor and tests are done, and she's still with us, so we're good.
Yeah. Interesting. So let me ask you this. Um, as far as dealing with injuries, I feel like I told you earlier, there's excuse makers, then there's champions. Champions don't make excuses. They just find a way to make things happen and rise above their circumstances. If you're an excuse maker, it's going to be really easy for you to pick something out of the sky every day to complain about. So as far as injuries go, I know injuries are part of the game. They're almost completely unavoidable. But when they happen, I'm curious how you deal with it as a coach, because I feel like when I used to coach, um, there's times where I've, not wanted to play a preseason game because I'm like, well, I'm going to play a preseason game. And if one of my best players gets injured, they got injured in a game that didn't matter, which I know you shouldn't coach. You shouldn't coach being afraid of injuries, but at the same time, they do happen. So I guess I'm curious. I know for me, I kind of evolved as a coach, going from being afraid of injuries to kind of taking the training wheels off and being like, we need to get prepared. And the only way to get prepared is to not hold back and go, full speed. So when those happen, how do you manage that, Chris? How do you manage your emotions? Because you care about the team, you care about the players, and you, of course, want to win. You're a competitive guy. So how do you manage your emotions versus, um, the nerd in you as a coach? You're like me, you're a nerd. So it's a challenge as a coach. You're like, okay, you're going to
Yeah.
throw me this curveball. Now we're missing this awesome player. Okay, let's figure it out. Let's put our
Um,
brains together. You know what I'm saying?
I don't know. I don't know why, but I take it super personal
Do
when one
you?
of my players get hurt. I do because, um, especially if somebody I'm asking them to do something,
Yeah.
like, hey, I want you to go through this gap, and I want you to do it with ferocity. And if they were to get hurt on that play, I would, it really hurts
Yeah.
me as a coach. I don't
Yeah.
want to see it.
Yeah.
Usually with injuries, I'm pretty quick to be like, all right, see ya. I'm gonna, and then after the game, I'm gonna come back and talk to you in
Yeah.
depth. At the moment, nothing personal. It's just I need to keep going.
Yeah.
You
You need
know,
to coach.
there's been a couple times where there was, I guess there was one injury insignificant where it really got to me, and it just changed the whole tempo of the rest of the game. It kind of took it, the play calling changed a little bit, and it was a little more aggressive, and it was more of let's end this game really quickly.
Mm.
Um, you know, uh, with injuries, we never want those to happen. We always try to coach, um, how to avoid the injuries and what the best techniques are to avoid injuries. And you're right. You don't want to play you don't want to play scared, like you're going to get hurt. You want to make sure that you're playing right and your technique is not being influenced by what you think or your fears.
Mm-hmm.
Make sure you have the right technique, trust yourself, trust your technique, and you're going to do fine.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think that I don't know. I just think that one time, this is the only time that's ever influenced me to do anything different. So,
So with all the injuries, you took them. I mean, not well. Like they bothered you, but you were able to let it go temporarily. Talk to them
oh
after the
yeah,
game. Keep
yeah,
coaching. Not miss a beat. But there's one that stuck out that really bothered you. And what you noticed about yourself was you it bothered you more than normal, and then your mindset was a little bit off. So your play calling changed. Does this?
oh
I,
yeah,
I
oh yeah,
I think what you're saying is you went from being nice Chris that wants to play good football and win the
yeah.
game and not rub anybody the wrong way to a
All
different
right,
mindset.
I want to tackle you as quickly as possible. Just let's get this game over with. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah. So a little bit less nice and just
yeah.
wanting. So was that because it was like a dirty hit or just
It was just I wanted to see that player right away, and the only way we can do it is if we ended this game right away.
yeah. Oh, gotcha. Okay, that makes sense. So injuries were the biggest obstacle for you. You didn't lose a game last season, right?
No,
Yeah.
no.
You
It
ran
was the
the
first year that we've ever, well, since the formation of our. Actually, no, I believe last year was the first year we've ever been undefeated
hmm.
from game one to the title game. Yeah.
You weren't the D3 year when you won the championship in D3?
No,
Who'd you
we
lose to?
lost to Cali War.
Oh, okay.
Lost Cali War by 4 points.
Ah.
And it was crazy. We had
Sorry to
there
bring it
was
up.
Terry, there was a pass in the air. I mean, we had Jesse Felker just screaming up the sideline on a wheel. She's
Yeah,
wide open. The ball gets to her, hits her in the hands, and it just
gotcha.
dropped. And everybody on our sidelines, it just, ugh,
Yeah,
because we all knew that was it. That was six
yeah,
points if she caught the ball. And but I mean, hats off to her. Hat off to her. Hats off to her. She's an amazing athlete.
yeah.
And
He's a baller.
yeah, it just didn't go her way that day.
Yeah,
And but we had a lot to be proud of that game. And to be honest, without that, we would not have blanked them 2 years later because that's all the ladies talked about was that game for
yeah.
years.
It bothered him.
2 years.
Yeah,
Some of them working out the gym just like Cali War.
yeah,
They're getting pumped just doing that. They're thinking about it. So
yeah.
they really wanted that game. That's why we went out and won it.
Before we get into this coming season, so we kind of went over last season, how that went. Injuries were the biggest obstacle. You ran the table. Um, so I guess the one thing I want to touch on before we get into this season is you were talking about coaching and dealing with injuries and adjusting things. Um, I'm curious, since I respect your guys' program a lot, how do you and Adam, um, how do you guys manage making changes year to year? Because I know, Utah Falcons, they have the same offense every year. The head coach is from the Air Force. You know what they're going to run. You need to stop it, right? You need to be
Yep.
sound and not over pursue. It's all misdirection. And I'm preaching to the choir, right?
Oh yeah.
So that's awesome, and it's very applicable for women's football because most of women's football they can't throw the ball at an elite level. So since it is a running system and it's based on technique and discipline, they can beat a lot of teams just with those things, right? So there's no reason. It's kind of like if you have 5 losses in 8 years, what is there? You don't need to fix anything, right? So they might have a different DC and maybe the defense changes a little bit. But I'm interested for your team. How do you guys make decisions about what you should tweak year to year, or do you kind of feel like you should copy and paste until further notice?
We actually look at our well we look at our stable. We see who's in our book, and we make sure that we set them up for success. We want to
Gotcha.
make sure we're we're running the right offense for them, we're running the right defense for them, replace them the right spots on defense and offense. Um,
Based on the
but
personnel, right?
that's correct.
Gotcha.
And
Okay.
I think that, you know, I think as a coach, you gotta kind of like be humble, so that way you've got to change too. You know, you just can't keep being the same, because if you're
Yeah.
the same, you keep doing the same thing, people figure it out.
Yeah.
If you want to beat Utah Falcons, getting an odd front, squeeze down on a 4 technique instead of a 5, and then they're going to run midline against you, triple
Yeah.
option. That's
Yeah.
it.
Yep.
And then you have to stay disciplined,
Yeah.
right? When those things happen, I mean, when it gets about that, then you're kind of one dimensional at that point, you
Mhm.
know. And people dubbed us one dimensional, and they expect us just to run the ball
Yeah.
all next year. But you know, to be honest, we probably could, and we could probably still beat everybody. But we want to be better than that. We actually want to change our team, and we want to make sure that our team is still evolving. And so that way, at some point in time, that the girls that we don't have that can't run the football anymore,
Mhm.
you know, they've got some backups, and we've got a backup plan for them. So we always evolve our playbooks. I know Coach Adams spends countless hours evolving his.
Mhm.
I spend a lot of time in clinics learning to adjust mine. It's it's something that both of us have really worked on, and we take pride in.
Gotcha. That makes sense. I love that answer too. That's the answer that I would give if somebody asked me. Because it's funny, Chris. When I used to coach, people would say really silly things, which they don't sound silly unless you're a real coach. So they would say, okay, Coach Terry, what what offense are you going to run this year? And so far, I've had one tryout, right? One out of three tryouts. So I'm like, well, I have no idea what offense I'm going to run. I have three. I don't even know who's on my team this year.
Yeah,
So how can I possibly answer that, right? So unless you're like a coach that would predetermine what you want to run without knowing your personnel, which I would never do, you can't answer that question. But it's just funny how some people, they had good intentions. They were just asking a genuine question. But it's just like, dude, that doesn't make any
yeah.
sense. Like, why would
I,
you
I
not match your
remember
personnel? You know what I'm saying?
I remember being in a radio interview, and I was like, yeah, this is our toughest team we're going against. I think it was D3 before the Cali War game. That's what it was.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I told the guy, I was like, yeah, you know, it's gonna be a tough game. And after the radio show was off, he goes, you know, you should run a cover 3 against those guys. And I'm like, why? I said, why? You know,
Yeah.
he's like, because that's how people stop those deep passes. And I'm like, sure. You
Yeah.
know, so you get those commentators, the armchair coaches
Yeah.
that want to
Yeah. For
give you the
sure.
best. I
Yeah.
mean, I appreciate it, you know, and don't get me wrong, I still, you know, if a fan sees something, then you should probably take a look into it. But if it's more, yeah, you know,
We have to consider the source, right? There's wisdom in
yes,
considering who you're talking to.
yes,
And if somebody has, for me, man, as a man, not only in football but in life, I try to assume positive intent. If somebody has good intentions with what they're asking me or saying, then it's all good. You know what I mean? I can easily dismiss what they're saying, and there's no harm. But it's just funny, like when somebody thinks they're asking you a good question, you're like, dude, that's not even like an applicable question. You know what I mean? I don't even know who's on my team, but it's just funny. But yeah, the
yeah,
last part of the interview, Chris, is this season, obviously.
yeah.
So you touched a little bit on this season as far as numbers have gotten better. You have your first international player, which is amazing. I love hearing that. Um, have you guys ever had an out-of-state player
We have, um, and we've got a total of 5, I believe, this year
out of
that
state?
come from out of state. Yeah,
Okay,
yeah.
that's awesome.
But 3 of them played with us last year,
Okay,
so not that big of a change. But the Bishop girls are not having a team this year, so we picked up a couple of Bishop players this year, that really wanted to keep playing, and I feel like we can teach them enough to where they can go back and teach the other girls there some technique and
yeah.
how things should be running, and hopefully that rubs off on them. But yeah, we've got a couple players from the Bay Area,
Mhm.
couple or 3 players from the Bay Area, and then we also have 2 from Bishop. I think those are the only 2, and then we have our international player. So
Yeah. So let me ask you this. I'm going to ask you one nosy question, and then we'll do this season and we'll be done. So my nosy question is, I've never dealt with out-of-state players or international players ever until this season. So that's all new to me. So what would you say from your perspective? Because, I mean, you're the head coach, so you're kind of the guy. What would you say is a reasonable standard for out-of-state players, international players? Because what we're seeing is, you have this player showing up in January, this player's flying in, February, some of them in March, unfortunately, which I think is a little bit too late. And then you have some players that are flying in for the weekend because we practice on Wednesday, Friday, Sunday. So they're able to get Friday and Sunday if they come in on the weekend, which that was intentional. So I guess my question for you, Chris, is what do you think is a good minimum standard for these players for as far as attendance and knowing the playbook and not feeling like they're gypping their teammates? Because when April, whatever, and the games start, you got to come up with a depth chart. You got to figure out who's your best 11 on both sides, but you want to make sure you don't mess up the culture in the process.
Well, as a coach, you can always say no. You can always say no. You don't have to have those players.
Yeah, of course.
If you don't feel comfortable.
Yeah.
I don't think I would accept a player out-of-state player on my team if I didn't believe that they were doing their best to actually study on the days that they are not there.
Gotcha.
2/3 attendance for us is mandatory for us. But the way that we've done it is we've actually the whole team has actually bent the time, so that way we can have these out-of-state players play with us. We now schedule our practices Friday nights, Saturday mornings for those people.
Gotcha.
In mind.
So
that way they get 2 days of practice with us. Yeah.
Yeah.
And so it's really tough, and that is a challenge.
Yeah.
Because again, you have to choose people that you think are going to be invested, and the commitment level is there for them, as far as it is for you.
Yeah.
That's the best advice I can give is if you're going to have an out-of-state player, make sure that they are 100% supported in what you want to do, and that there is great communication between you and those players. That's the biggest concern.
So you would say a combination of their full commitment to getting the most when they're not there, and then your minimum is 2/3.
Yeah. Oh yeah. At least with those folks. Yes.
Yeah.
If you're here on the team, you're expected to be here every day.
Yeah. Gotcha. That's a fair answer. So yeah, let's get into this season. So I took a look at the schedule. Like I said, I follow all the teams that I view as excellence. And you're one of them. So I saw the schedule, I'm trying to think now. Like you said, you're playing Minnesota, which will be an interesting game. Minnesota has been a good team for a while. They actually surprised me last year because they played the championship versus Boston, and they played them pretty tough. And Boston is Boston. You know what I mean? They make a lot of people look, not competitive, basically, for us.
Make them look silly, is what we say.
Yeah. So the fact that Minnesota made that a game makes it a very intriguing matchup with you guys. So I assume that one's going to be streamed.
Yes. Minnesota and us will be streamed. That's our first home game. That's our opener.
Okay.
So
is it the first game or first home game?
First home game.
Okay.
So
gotcha.
First home game, and it's in our second week scheduling.
Okay.
So
yeah, I saw in your schedule. You play Cali War again, I assume?
Twice.
Yeah.
We play them there, and then we play them here. So
yeah,
it's going to be a good matchup.
Yeah, your schedule's not easy for sure.
No.
And you're also playing my former team, which is awesome because I'm pretty sure if the calendar is correct, that's our bye week. So I'll be able to go to that game. So I'll be able to meet you in person for the first time.
There you go.
And watch that game. But I was interested because when you guys played my former team in the playoffs last year, I think we had a game too. So we're, doing our game. Then afterwards, it was being streamed, so I was able to catch like some of the end of the game, right? And I was able to watch the stream a little bit. But of course, I missed most of the game, and so there's nothing substituting from watching a full game. But what would you say about how that game went, and then how you view them on your schedule this year, especially playing in Denver? It's a little bit, harder.
That's playing in Denver is always tough.
Yeah,
If you're not used to elevation, then it's going to eat at you. I think that team is a good team. I think we played really sloppy last time we played them.
yeah.
But then again, I mean, Denver is a really good team, so it's one of those things where
You want to give them credit too, yeah.
I mean, we can't stomp on them,
Yeah,
but they did a great job in holding us to a low number of points. But when it came down to it, I really think it was the defense really kept them in the game. They made some stops when they had to, and they converted when they really needed it. That's what really crippled us. And our defense is known as a bend don't break defense, and we actually broke a couple times in that game, and that's truly I truly believe that's what kept them in the game for themselves.
yeah,
There's a
for a
couple
while.
great catches that they had made. So, uh, I can't say enough about Denver. They're a good team. This year we're going to come at them as full force again. We kind of know what they're about now,
Mhm.
so we know how to counteract that. We've never played them before up until last year, so we didn't know
Gotcha.
what to expect. We really didn't. So we went in there with our best of attitude and just did the best we could, and we came out a winner on that one.
Gotcha. That's fair. So, is there any other big games I'm missing besides Cali War, Minnesota, and my former team? Rest of some D3 teams or no?
D3 team, or we have Kern County
Yeah.
and yeah, and
Okay.
then Medford, Lady Glades.
Gotcha.
Um, Kern is actually Kern's getting better, so I
They
wouldn't
are.
write them off right away. I really feel like they're going to be competitive this year. In the D3, I think they're actually going to do something there. They have some really good ladies, and they're really willing to learn. I just, again, it comes with the culture of if you have the right coaches in the right places with the right players, you're going to have a great team, and they have the right players. I feel like they're just trying to find the right coach for that
Hmm.
program right now.
Yeah, I know that Sin City Trojans don't have a team this year.
No,
Some of those players are playing for Kern County.
yeah,
So, I mean, who knows? They might be a contender in D3. I think they'll have their hands full with you guys, but we'll see how they do in
yeah,
D3.
yeah. We'll see. I think they played against us last year. They actually played a really good game.
Did they?
I actually liked that. Yeah, I really liked that game that we played against them. It wasn't a complete blowout. Those ladies were really hardworking. They helped us up. We helped them up.
Yeah,
Gave each other
good
a pat on the
sportsmanship.
head. I mean, it was a great game.
Yeah,
And we really liked that team. So um,
that's how it should be.
my I think they just need the right coaches to lead that group. They have a really good team.
Hmm, interesting. So the closing statement for you, Chris. You guys were in D3, won a championship. D2 won a championship, and now you're with the big boys, or I should say the big girls, in what they call WFA Pro. So
Yeah,
that WFA Pro, it's on paper a bunch of good teams with big rosters and a certain degree of pedigree to all their
yep.
programs. Um, so I guess what is your view of WFA Pro and how you see this season going, or is it
Man,
hard to say?
it's hard to say. I like
Yeah,
I like the teams that are in the WFA Pro. Um, I'm a football fan, so
yeah,
watching
me
the
too.
teams,
Yeah,
when I get film, I watch the first time I watch film, I don't even watch to analyze. I like watch the game,
yeah. As a
and I'm like,
football
man,
fan,
that was a good game. Okay, let's
yeah,
watch it over. Let's analyze this.
yeah,
The first time I get film, I always watch because I'm a fan of this game.
yeah.
And WFA Pro, I think, are taking the right steps. And I think we've got the right teams in the right spots, but let's go. I really think there's going to be a lot of competition this year. Like you said, a lot of international players are come across the pond to go play with us. Um, I think this year is going to be the year that we're going to start turning heads with the with women's football in
Yeah,
general.
yeah,
So it's our league, your league, and I'm willing to bet someday that our leagues are going to come together at some point in time. I mean, look at the NFL. That's
yeah,
how it happened,
yeah.
and I think that conversation needs to be put out there somehow, some way.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, it's
Because
definitely
then you
anything's.
get games like Boston versus Texas Elites. You get those cool games.
Yeah, yeah. No, I mean, in a perfect world, in my opinion, at the very least, the Division One champion of WFA would play the champion of WNFC every year, regardless. That would be the
Yeah.
minimum. We meet in a neutral location, so there's no home
Yep.
field advantage.
Nope.
We split the bill 50-50. We see who the best in the nation is.
Oh yeah. I remember we were at the end of last year, we were trying to figure out ways. Well, where's the halfway point from X to X, X to Y?
Yeah,
And
yeah,
then we're like, well, could we fundraise that much money to play one
yeah.
team and say, hey,
From
let's meet here?
Nevada to Boston, yeah.
Yeah,
Meet
Omaha,
Nebraska or
by the
something.
way.
Yeah,
Omaha, by the way. Yeah.
yeah,
So so we've really thought about this. Like we
yeah.
really want to, and it's not just to like throw shade at other teams. It's really to
No,
promote our league and get the best players playing the best players.
yeah,
And it's all about just making the ladies the front and foremost of this league, and making sure that everybody is reminded that the reason that we're all doing this is for these ladies that are playing on the field.
yeah. Absolutely, man. Well said, Chris. I appreciate your time, man. I think I covered most of the stuff I wanted to cover. It was great to catch up with you. I can't wait for this season. You guys do belong in the WFA Pro. I'm just like
I
you, man. We have a
appreciate
lot
it.
of things in common. So I'm a fan of the sport. I'm looking for. I got these games circled in my mind. Nevada versus Minnesota at home, and I can't wait, man. Hopefully, St. Louis doesn't take a step backwards, and so they
Yeah.
can give Boston a run. But as a football fan, I mean, I'm like a kid in a candy store. You know what I'm saying? NFL's over,
Yeah.
and now I'm ready to dive into women's.
Yeah, I'm so excited for this year. We have so many great teams.
Yeah,
St. Louis, Pittsburgh on the other side on the other side.
yeah,
Boston, of course. Everybody likes Boston,
yeah,
but Pittsburgh and St. Louis are the two teams that I'm really looking forward to seeing what's going on and how they perform this year.
yeah. I always say it takes about 3 weeks to figure out what's going on, right? Like you don't
Yeah.
really know. You know if their pedigree is good, but you don't know, if they have a rebuilding year or what's going on. But about 3 weeks into the season, I feel like I have a pretty good grasp on things, so I can start making predictions and feel good about what I'm saying, and I'm not just a guy talking out of his ass. You know what I mean?
That's right. You don't
Yeah,
want to say anything too early either.
yeah,
Yeah,
right, right.
well, you remember, Coach, you were the one that said.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Exactly, exactly. But yeah, man, it's great to
Yeah,
talk to
I
you.
feel like I feel like I can talk to you for hours, Terry. Thank you so much for having me on again, and I'd be happy to come on whenever you'd like.
Sounds good, man. I'll talk to you soon.
All right, thanks, Terry.
Good luck this season.
Thank you.